Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GE Honesty podcast, episode 1. I'm your host, Callum. We're a group of farmers, consumers, all pushing back on the gene technology bill. And part of the reason why we wanted to start this platform, I guess, is so we can keep having these conversations and informing the public about this really important GE issue. We've got Paul, who's our founder of GE Honesty, alongside Phyllis Tishinin. And you're also a farmer, aren't you, Paul? And a tech innovator. But perhaps you could just quickly, have I captured everything about you? What else is there to know about Paul?
I guess I've always been interested in getting back to nature and working with nature rather than against it. But also interested in innovation. So for a lot of my career, I've been involved in project managing and leading research, financing it. I've worked in different countries, and in the US, one of the scientists that I work with over there is the former Chief of Transportation and Packaging in the Research Division of the United States Department of Agriculture. So he was involved in a supply chain project for several years with us. And his colleague, Dr. Richard Woodruff, who led a lot of innovation for United Fruit Company, which is formerly Chiquita, and responsible for many patents to do with extending the storage life of perishable foods. So what we were looking at there was a science of controlled atmosphere, which is low oxygen. So it's just taking existing air and changing the concentration of air. So we've got low oxygen, elevated CO2, and you could extend the storage life. Well-proven science, say with berry fruit, which blueberries might have a 2 to 3 week storage life. Under this technology, you could have a 6-week storage life. And therefore, we were looking at the idea of, well, okay, that would enable us to transport by sea blueberries in this technology to the United States market instead of having to fly it, and therefore lead to significant cost savings. So these are some of the things that I've been involved in. And then we sort of pivoted and started to develop supply chain modelling programs. So quite extensive detail where we've mapped every phase of the supply chain. And what we were doing there was baselining for exporters, growers, distributors, what the margins were for their business, and then introduce new technology to see what the cost benefit of that was. So so that was sort of my background, but I was raised on a farm. My dad was a sheep and beef farmer. I was born in Tikawiti, which is the King Country, central North Island. And that's not far from where the farm is. So we ended up, now one of the things I do is manage our investment portfolio for the family and set up a trust to grow wealth and also make a difference, have funds that we can apply to things that make a difference. Again, helped the financing of GE Honesty so that we could set it up and bring attention to this very important issue. So anyway, that's
How big's your farm?
It's about 1,800 acres. So and we milk just over 1,000 cows. We also have a beef unit, and so we raise about 400 steers, and we replace our own heifers, so we have about 250 heifer replacements that go into the herd, in their second, third year.
So you've always had farming in the family, but you came to inheriting the farm or owning the farm later in life, right?
My dad was, he was one of the last drovers in the country, and he also a shearer. So he made his money droving and shearing in those days. So he was very good at it, but particularly just street smart. So he left school at 12 years old, and he self-educated really. And, at 21, he'd bought his first farm, 5,000 acres down there in the Kingston. So he was quite talented and ended up buying a farm in South Auckland, and then that became a residential zoned. And so I assisted him with that transaction. So for me, Taupo was not part of the family farm, but it was me getting back to my roots, getting back to farming, which I love. Just love getting out there and being amongst nature and amongst the animals and seeing them do well.
Can I ask when was your first encounter with GMOs? Can you recall where you first sort of got engaged on that subject?
Well, I guess off the back of about 20 years ago, New Zealand was very strong, very aware of GE and wanting to keep it out of New Zealand. So we're not talking genetics here in the sense of a bull and a cow genetics. We're talking artificial engineering of genes where they take a bit of the chromosome and they splice that from anywhere. So it could be a wolf, or it could be somebody, or it could be a part of a plant, and they put it into, well, for example, a plant, a wheat crop or whatever. And that's what I'm talking about. That's genetic engineering. It does not happen in nature, and it is not safe. And I can explain why that is,
It's so different now, compared to 20 years ago. I mean, that's my take. I wasn't here 20 years ago. You could probably tell from my accent, obviously, but it just seems the awareness is very different now to what it was then. And the media coverage is not as intense then.
No, and it's a bit of it is a concern, because given that GE foods are seriously bad for people's health, and New Zealand prides itself on producing food from a clean, green, natural environment, and what's going to happen is we'll lose that. We'll lose that competitive advantage. But you're absolutely right. Why? Why is it that 20 years ago this issue was widely known amongst the public? And you just need to look at the old films and the protests that happened at that time, and you go why? Well, is it the fact that people are more distracted? They've, is it the fact that just life and it's different? There are certainly a lot of distractions for people these days, but we're talking your health, which should be a major priority. So I think one of the things is the way the government has gone about trying to get this bill over has been not for the benefit of getting the word out and being honest about the issues. You hear the minister the other day talk about GE being safe. It's just a false statement. GE is not safe. There's plenty of research done on that internationally and research papers we can draw on where, and in fact, that's my resurgence of interest in this space happened because I identified that our cows on the farm, that we're having what I thought was an exceptionally high death rate, and cows that had to be sent for pet food. So you go what's going on? And the word was, that's just acceptable these days in conventional farming. I'm going, no, that's... So I started talking to the organic guys, and so the organic herds, what's your death rate in pet food cows? Less than 2%. Ours was building each year that we bought the farm, and it's 7 to 8%. So that's a huge cost to the business. Over $400,000 worth of stock, cows, and over $500,000 worth of milk lost.
Wow.
So that's when I started saying that this just doesn't feel right. And so what they sort of identified was that a lot of the cows that were withering away, and this was commonly understood to be Johne's disease, which is on the increase in New Zealand, and it's such a problem these days that a lot of the farmers, when they were buying cows, they want them certified that they haven't got Johne's disease. Okay, so it is a huge issue. And so, but anyway, through a lot of conversations with experts in the field, scientists and GE scientists, and looking at research papers and working with Phyllis Ditchin, I basically joined the dots and said, okay, discovered that we had been feeding GE feed to our cows in the form of GE dried distiller's grain, which is a big thing, big supplementary food in New Zealand, and some GE soil hull from South America. And I didn't really think about it. We've owned the farm now for four seasons, so 4 years. And, a lot of that time I've been travelling and looking at issues overseas to do with food. So anyway, I joined the dots and said, okay, we've got to stop feeding our cows G. So we don't do that now on the farm. The health of the cows has improved because what it was doing was it was upsetting the rumen, so they weren't able to digest the food properly, had the runs, so it lowered their immune system. So it made them more vulnerable to disease. So that's what the root of the cause is, in my view. Being a supply chain analyst, my brain works in the way where I like to study, analyse and join the dots. And that's what I do with investments, which, I've been quite fortunate there. They've done quite well, looking at trends and other things, of course. But, so that's how I identified it.
Rumen, is that the bacteria in the soil, or is that in the gut of the cow?
It's in the gut of the cow. The cows have several stomachs and in the process of digesting their food. So it's basically upsets the rumen and lowers the immune system is the issue. And so therefore makes them more acceptable to disease.
So would you say, I don't know if you know this, but most conventional farmers, are they all using GE feed or likely to be?
It depends, because the way the industry has developed is the intensification of farming has been supported by supplementary feed. Now, there are farmers that don't, there are various degrees of that, and they sort of call them a system 1 or a system 2 or a system 5 or, known as, for example. And so at the high end of that, then you're feeding a lot of supplementary feed. You're increasing, so basically what you put in, you get out in milk. In theory, that's the idea. So you can support and pump, if you can carry more cows. So if you've got a 300-acre farm, which, might have 400 cows, and then you can supplementary feed and carry more cows and you can increase more milk. So that's the idea. But I think it's from a cost-benefit situation, looking at it today in the industry and what we went through, because I really question that supplementary feeding to that extent is good business. Not just, and I say that because if you look at, for example, an organic herd, which definitely is growing in New Zealand, organic industry, they've got a lower cost of production, and for example, a organic herd with the systems they use, they might produce, their cost base might be sort of $4.70 per kilogram of milk solids. Well, they're getting $12 per kilogram of milk solids or thereabouts for their milk this season. So there's a good margin. Now, a conventional farm, just a conventional farm, the average, according to Dairy NZ, cost is about $8.27 to $8.50. So they get $10, right? So what's that? You just say $1.50 margin as opposed to $7 on the other side, roughly. So you go well, how does this make sense? And then, we went through COVID, and then there were supply chain issues, and the cost of feed went up, and so you can't control that, and you're carrying more cows than your farm can support. So you have to have the feed, so you can go backwards very quickly. So I think that supplementary feeding is a higher risk business with a lower margin. That's what I sort of feel, and so we're actually transitioning our farm now away from convention to a regenerative farm. So back to nature, working with nature more rather than fighting it, pumping things into it. And so that's with the idea of, going organic, and it'll be more profitable. It just makes sense.
Sounds it.
Yeah.
Do you think farmers at large support this bill, or even have an awareness of what this bill means for them and also their exports as well? Do you think there is that awareness amongst farmers or not?
Not sufficient, I don't think. And this is because, farmers rely on their industry leaders to guide them, to help with decision making on these important issues. Now, I have a good friend whose brother farms about 2,000 cows, and they run a good operation. I was talking to him; he knew nothing about it, this genetic engineering bill, and didn't even know what genetic engineering was.
What about GMOs? Did he know what GMOs?
No.
Really?
No.
Okay.
So what's this about? Because, and when I started talking to him and the importance of it, and why? Well, because he's 7 days a week, 24/7 on his business.
Totally.
He ain't got the time.
Yep.
So, the difference with me is that I'm a farm owner and we have a management team which runs the farm, and I'm involved in a lot of other things, investments, and I can make time to study and look at these things in detail. Yeah. And so most farmers don't have that opportunity.
I think it'd be good actually for people listening as well. We can do a bit of a state of the nation just in terms of what GE Honesty has done so far. Obviously, we've done a few supermarket vigils up here in Ariwa, a few around the city. We also did Fonterra protests, which I'd love you to chime in about. And I guess where we are at now with the bill is we've got an extension to the 22nd of August, when that now goes to second reading, am I right? And then that's now where it becomes a bit more serious in terms of more firm legislation.
Yes.
Then onwards. So it's really critical, obviously, in the run up to this 22nd of August, that people are still contacting MPs and letting them know what they think, or that they don't want this bill altogether. But I'm keen to chat about the Fonterra angle, and I guess what was the rationale for you and us, I guess, why we went to go to Fonterra and make a stand?
Well, we're a Fonterra supplier and we're a Fonterra shareholder. And Fonterra, definitely encourages its supplier and shareholder base to share things that are a concern to them. And to support that, there's a regional Fonterra councillor representative in 26 regions throughout New Zealand, simply to hear farmers' concerns and then promote them up the chain, right to, for example, the chairman. And, Fonterra has been a fantastic company for New Zealand, fantastic corporate. I mean, it's 24% of New Zealand exports. It's making a huge contribution. And I guess the discovery of research that is an Italian research paper, which we studied, which indicates that GE genes get into milk. So quite serious. So if you're feeding your cows or allowing your cows to be feed, because of the way that the chemistry works, the science works, those genes get into the cells and into the milk, right? So that's shocking. You also understand, and there's plenty of research papers on this, that GE food causes cancers, causes tumours, causes fertility issues, allergies, all those things. So, that's why, the minister the other day saying, what's his name? Andrew Hogarth. Saying it, GE's safe is like shooting yourself in the foot and then jumping on yourself and then throwing yourself off a cliff. I mean, that's just stupidity. It's just like, why do they make these statements if you're not scientifically correct?
Who's in their ear? That's what I wonder.
So getting back to Fonterra, so I started communicating with one of the directors and then a second director, and then put my concerns up to the Fonterra council members and the chairman of that council group, who has then passed that information on to the chairman. Okay, so now Fonterra are aware that these GE genes get into milk. And also, I've felt not only is the government bill flawed because it's not scientifically accurate in what they're trying to do, the thing that they haven't communicated to the public of New Zealand, and even very well to the farmers at all, they haven't communicated that it doesn't matter how you splice these genes, they'll still contaminate everything. Right, so if you they're promoting GE wiregrass, and ag research is saying it's great for New Zealand. And well, number one, they're making a lot of speculative statements that hasn't been studied for long term, so it's high risk. Right, I have an investment portfolio. I tell you what, there's not a lot that I'll invest in that is essentially high risk, So I look at that, and then they say, oh, well, but there's grasses that can do better in the drought. And you go, yeah, okay. But again, not proven over the long term. Actually tested in the laboratory, yes, but not proven. And what cost? So it's a GE grass that's good in the drought. Well, whip-de-doo, You contaminate everything else, but you can grow grass in the drought. And by the way, that's not proven over the long term. So, and the other thing that's important to understand about typically these grasses is what comes with them when they do the splicing is thousands of off-target effects. In other words, yes, it carries a characteristic, but it also carries unknown consequences of what these genes can do. So in other words, that's the danger of them. So it's essentially hugely risky because you put it in the ground, but you don't know all the other consequences. And like in the in human genome, there's 15 million genomes that you would have to assess before you could say something was safe. If you were going to do a full analysis, something like grasses are out 16 billion. It's even more. So in order to determine that a GMO is safe, you actually have to do a study of all that stuff, so they don't do it. So they can never guarantee that it is safe. And you've got this, and they're going to plant them in the ground, and then they contaminate the gene jumps into other grasses, and then it jumps into the trees, and then it jumps into so New Zealand's flora and fauna will never be, the biodiversity will never be the same again because these idiots are trying to put this in. And when they do, right, they're trying to build guardrails around it. That's what Fonterra has done with its submission to the bill. It said, but you know why? Because the government came to the industry and said, this is going to happen whether you like it or not. So the government actually is at the end in fault of taking a non-scientific, non-democratic attitude towards pushing this bill through on the basis that it is going to be good for the country's economy. Well, it couldn't be worse because, I was at the results meeting in September last year for Fonterra as a shareholder, and I asked Miles Harrell, who is the CEO of Fonterra, has he seen a cost-benefit analysis in favour of GE? He said no. Well, I haven't seen one from the government. Have you?
I have not.
So they are making statements which, one, scientifically are risky, not guaranteed to happen, i.e. the benefits, and then they're making it on the basis that it's going to do this wonderful thing for the economy when they not even able to produce a cost-benefit analysis in favour. So it's just so unprofessional. And so anyway, getting back to the fact that the government is forcing this through industry. Industry then took the attitude of shivers. If this bill's going to go through, let's try and put some guardrails around these risks. And that's what all the submission is by Federated Farmers, by Fonterra, by the New Zealand Meat Board, and so that's how it happened. But instead of actually taking a step back and saying, what is the real science here? Well, the real science is you put a GMO in the ground, it contaminates everything. That's the process. Eventually, over time, it gets into everything. And you just need to look to the US and Australia for that. And I can prove it because in Australia, 20 years ago, they released GMOs. And what's happened since is that they have contaminated all the grains and the crops over there are slowly getting contaminated. So the government of Australia has turned around and said, okay, Callum, you're a non-GE grower of barley, and I might be an organic grower of oats, right? Or persimmons, or apples, or oranges, or tomatoes, right? And the government said, well, given the knowledge now that GE genes migrate and get into everything, but look, we'll still let you call your product non-GE, and I'm allowed to call my product non-GE, organic, so long as it's got less than 5% GE genes in it. And you're going hang on a minute, does the public know that? Does the public know that grains from Australia are not 100% natural? That it's got a gene in there, supposedly less than 5%, which is bad for your health, right? Isn't it deceitful?
Very deceitful. Yeah. People want to know what they're eating.
Well,
especially organic food. You can't. There's no food integrity in that.
Yeah,
at
exactly.
all.
No food integrity. So, anyway, in our research, Phyllis and I wrote a paper which is on the GE Foundation, Honesty Foundation website, and bringing all these research forward and making statements. It's very easy to read. If you want to go into the appendices and read the actual scientific papers or the market reports, you can, So that was one of the things that we've been trying to do. But as far as Fonterra is concerned, our mission, our goal is to help awareness, help the board understand. Look, none of these guys have got the time to do a deep dive into this subject. They're reliant on their scientists. And then you have to understand a scientist's brain and what they like doing. They like doing science. It's exciting. This area is very exciting, right? It could do this, it could do that, it could have this benefit. We should do this. We need this innovation, right? And you go, hang on a minute, hang on. And they go down the track and they come up with some, GMO something. And the question is asked at the end, is it safe? Is it safe? What are the consequences? No, but I just like doing the science, right? This will innovate. This will be, And unfortunately, scientists shouldn't drive innovation. Innovation should actually be driven by the market, right? What does the market want? Where is the fit? It starts there. And then you come back, and you're quite right. The international trend is away from GE foods. People want non-GE foods. You just need Trader Joe's, which is a huge grocery chain in America. They have their own organic line and have done since early 2000s. The organic line, for example, is bigger than the other produce line, which could be GE food. Costco's, if you just look on and see there, we have a really interesting clip about, this guy proudly promoting non-GE lamb from New Zealand, right?
I've seen this.
Yeah. You've seen it? Yeah, and you go, well, it's not just non-GE from other parts of the world, it's from New Zealand. Like, this is the real stuff, and so we have a great reputation that we should be protecting, and it is our competitive advantage. So that's my concern with Fonterra is, hey guys, be aware of what's actually happening here. This science has gone too far. We're going to lose our GE-free status. The market is moving towards non-GE and organic foods. Who's going to be able to provide that? If the rest of the world has gone GE food, and then more and more people understand that it's really bad for your health, so the demand for non-GE food, where is it going to come from? And that's our opportunity, and that's our future. So I can see, as a Fonterra farmer and a farmer in New Zealand, if you allow GE crops to be grown in New Zealand, not only will it contaminate New Zealand's flora and fauna, so our biodiversity will go. That's the scientific fact. That's the scientific truth. Many leading scientists have been saying that, but for some reason, the government's ignored it. Their voices haven't been able to get out into the public. For whatever reason, the widely distributed, widely understood, we have this situation. So, but additionally to contamination, we'll lose our GE-free status. And what's going to happen there is, the market's going to go, why do we want to buy food from New Zealand? In the past it was clean and green. Now it's just GE food like everybody else. So my feeling on that is what's going to happen is that farmers will get less. They'll be paid less for their food. Now, the margin, if you go back to Fonterra's margin, a conventional farm, and the margin was about $1.50. If our supply chain costs go up, if interest rates go up, our profit's gone, right? So, and if we get paid less, right, than we are now, our profit is gone. So that's where I'm saying that this bill is putting the viability of farming in New Zealand at risk, all farmers at risk. No farmers support anything that risks their livelihoods. This bill risks our future, risks our livelihoods, and not only that, bad for New Zealanders' health and bad for our children and their grandchildren's health.
I mean, exports for dairy, I think, is about 24% of the entire economy.
Yeah.
That's a big portion of the economy. To gamble that export on how we're perceived on a world stage and that premium product that we have in overseas supermarkets, I think is incredibly reckless.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think for Fonterra, now that the board, certainly the chairman of Fonterra, knows, this is not just Paul's opinion, this is the scientific fact. It will contaminate everything. It is going to risk the viability of farming in New Zealand and therefore Fonterra's future viability. So I've indicated, obviously I know a little bit about governance, and as a board, particularly of a public company, which partly Fonterra has public, but also 8,000 old farmers it's representing, the board is going to have to, if this bill goes through, it's going to have to flag as a major risk to its future that GE could destroy its business. Well, certainly it's a huge risk to the business. So they would have to write that into their audited financial accounts and how they're going to manage that risk. Well, you can't manage the risk because once it gets out there, a grass, for example, let's just take ryegrass, seeds go everywhere, and also what about the pollen blowing around in the wind with the genes in them? They go everywhere.
Worries me over the bees as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Everything is affected. Everything is affected.
Not really taking into account the full complexity of life as well. Like it's overly simplified, all of these claims.
Well, it's first of all misleading information coming from government. Statements made like, oh, well, look, Australia can export non-GE and organic and GE crops. We're just going to do the same. Hang on a minute. They are all contaminated. All of them are contaminated. Do you want to be like that? Well, who's been informing government? That's the science. That's what's happening. So who has been informing government for government to make a statement like, coexistence? There's no coexistence without contamination. It's just a stupid statement to make, and it's non-scientific, right?
Yeah.
So who are the scientists giving the government, allowing them to act so foolish, allowing them to make such a foolish statement, which isn't true? Yeah. So, it's beyond me. It's beyond me.
Maybe that's something we can talk about because I think there's two sides of this science argument that we're in. There's the pro-GE scientists, there's the Crown scientists, the people at MBIE, and they're the big proponents of the bill, of course. And then there's the anti-GE, but the voices are not really as heard. They're not as covered as much in the media. I feel, making a statement here, I think the media is incredibly biased on this issue. And I think when you do start to uncover that, follow the money, you start to realise, oh, actually, seems something is a little bit amiss.
Well, I mean, the minister.
Which one?
The first. We've got a new minister of science and technology.
You mean Judith was original? Shane Retty is the existing one. Yeah. So Judith brought the bill in and then scarpered away. Yeah.
One of the statements she made is follow the science. Okay, now if you follow the science, it leads to contamination, right? So what's allowed her to make that statement and try and sell it to the New Zealand public when it's just false? It's just beyond me.
I don't think they know what they're talking about themselves.
You have to understand, I think I actually got a little bit of background to this. The New Zealand government has underfunded science in New Zealand for many years.
Yes.
And so what it's said to the Crown Research Institute says, look, your science has to have a commercial outcome. It's got to be more commercial. So what the New Zealand scientists have done is said, okay, government wants us to be, we're going to have to pay for ourselves. So how can we do that? I know. We'll make these genetically engineered seeds, we'll patent them, and we'll sell them to farmers. And you know what? They'll have to buy them off us every year because they don't have any, they're neutered, right?
So like sterilised seeds,
Yeah.
Reproduce.
Yeah. So Okay. And
That sounds so wrong. Anyway.
Exactly. But the idea is they can make money out of it, right? And then they can be, oh, well done from the government, but it's destroying the environment in the process, So that's why you've got this tension between scientists, because you've got those that feel this has to happen because we need this to innovate. We don't need this to innovate. For God's sake, New Zealand has become a leader in agriculture, not because of genetically engineered organisms, but because of our smart knowledge. There's plenty of other areas to innovate with rather than risk something that's going to destroy our future. Why would you do that? Okay. It doesn't make any sense. If I put my investor hat on, it just doesn't make sense. And that's what I'm saying to the board of Fonterra, is I'm saying, follow the science. Yeah, you've done the same thing. You're looking at your science to do and innovate in a field that is so risky that can risk the future of farming in New Zealand and Fonterra's future. Why would you go there? Why would you go there? Okay, certainly not because you need GE to keep it become a world leader. No, it's not that. We're already a world leader. We can prove that we don't need it. In the past, there's all sorts of ways of, one of the misleading bits of information is, well, we can use this for climate change. We can use these GEs and they will mean that the cows won't fart as much and we won't give us as much methane and that. Wrong. Number one, is it been proven? Has it been proven over the long term? Well, yes. Well, where else is it being used? Everybody overseas is using it and we haven't been able to, use it in New Zealand, so our farmers are missing out. Hang on. So the facts are it's all you have to. Have you got into Australia? No. Why not? Well, they wouldn't allow us. They wouldn't allow us. So even the Australians are keeping it out, but the New Zealand government is safe. Going to just contaminate the rest of New Zealand. That's the other thing. Unless we speak up now, then once these GMOs are planted, if that bill is passed, they'll be planted. This will change us forever. We can't put them back in the box. So, it's just it doesn't make any economic sense, any scientific sense.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, Paul.
And any market sense.
No. Yeah, here we are in the good fight. A thing I always think about is why do we even need them in the first place? Why do we even need GMOs? But it's just this constant chasing of these commercialization outcomes just erode the food integrity of our food system, which now is a natural food producer, and that's how we're perceived on the world stage. Our economy being at risk for that. It's just, there's so many things to be concerned about.
I agree.
Yeah. Why do we even need them, though? That's the thing I just don't understand.
Well, if you take the case of okay, how can we sort of deal with climate change issues? The answer is this: through diverse species, you can produce less methane. Your cows will produce less methane. All right, through feeding certain varieties of seaweed, kelp, your cows will produce less methane. These are all natural ways of doing it. Why are we risking something that's not proven, something that's going to contaminate New Zealand, when we have better ways which are being not addressed? Why? Because the Crown Research Institutes can't make money out of them. No. Those other ways are natural. We're already doing them.
We're not funding science properly.
Well,
that's the issue. Because the scientists are having to seek out these.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a favour of, a better funding of science, science doing basic research, and what that means is working in areas, allow them to investigate that may not have an immediate commercial benefit. Yeah. It's just a science that may be promising, and. I don't think we fund basic research well in New Zealand, and they should have more funding for doing research, but keep the consequence of that in mind. Number one, it's like a doctor, do no harm, right? Number one, that's it. Right? Exactly. So let that be the guide of what are the consequences, which is something that scientists aren't very good at thinking. They're just all excited about doing whatever.
Also, to add to that point, the precautionary principle has been completely removed from the bill altogether. It's not in there.
Yeah.
It was before. Why is that not in there?
Well, it's stupidity. It's just absolute ignorance. That's all it can be, just ignorant. I mean, it's just like, you and I understand about food and we're concerned about our health, right? We don't want to eat GE food. What on earth has the government gone and approved the fact that GE food doesn't have to be labelled here in New Zealand? Where does that argument go? And there's no food integrity in that. And for a lot of consumers, which if they knew that food had G in it, they wouldn't buy. They're deceiving. They're just letting it go under the carpet, right? So I'm astounded, just absolutely astounded that got through. Yeah, and the thing is, let's be like Australia. We'll just align with Australia. Hang on a minute. Don't you understand? Australia have just stuffed up their agricultural economy through releasing genes, gene-edited GMOs in their environment. It's proven. The moment the wider market internationally goes, there are more and more, which there will be, more and more evidence of GE food causing health issues, Australia won't be able to supply non-GE food. Not 100% non-GE food. So why are we following an economy that's made just to shot themselves in the foot from a market perspective, from a commercial perspective, from an honesty perspective, and are deceiving their customers? Why would we want to follow that? And that's my point to Fonterra. Have you checked that there are GE genes in the milk? Answer, no. Why? Answer, because the market doesn't demand it. And you're going like, hang on a minute. This GE food, right, is bad for people's health, but you're not checking for it in your milk because the market doesn't demand it? Where is the food integrity in that? And isn't that deceiving our customers? So that's what I'm saying. Fonterra is losing its way, is losing its food integrity, is deceiving its customers. And we shouldn't even be on that road. We should be, the founders of the cooperative were farmers who were absolutely honest and committed to producing good food, right? And they grew on those values. And I'm afraid that today's Fonterra is losing its values. But I have hope. Peter McBride, the chairman, is an astute man. I think he hasn't done a deep dive, as the other directors, into the issue of GE. He's been guided by their own science team. But I feel that our exposure of the real risks associated with this, that his knowledge of that, he will lead and he will make a change. And what needs to happen is, in my view, is Fonterra need to stand up and say, our submission is actually flawed because it won't stop GE genes, GMO crops being released in New Zealand. These guardrails are just fallacy that they'll work in controlling this. They can't control it. On that basis, we don't want to be part of this, right? And we will push back, we will oppose this bill. And also, I'm asking for a step further. I'm asking for Fonterra to stop their farmers feeding GE feed to the cows. Now, Fonterra found that with palm kernel, which is they've allowed to be fed to cows, that farmers were feeding too much of it because it was a low-cost, relatively cheap supplementary food. That tainted the milk. Why on earth wouldn't you, they accepted that affected the milk, right? So if you're feeding GE feed to the cows, why wouldn't you think that would affect the milk? And that's what the Italian study confirms.
Wow. People will be shocked to hear all this stuff, I think.
Yeah, it is shocking. To be honest, it's bloody shocking. How the hell did we get here? And the intensification and supplementary feed of stock in New Zealand, the drive, really, it is shocking. But we still can do something about it. The good news is today we can do something about it. Today Fonterra can do something about it. And I'm saying, let's just put our hand up and just say that this bill is not going to work for New Zealand. It's not going to work for Fonterra, right? And let's just oppose this bill, have the courage to do it. Peter McBride, lead your team, lead your board, have the courage to make the right decision. here now that you are better informed. You know, somebody did the science, just like the government. You know, you have to feel like, okay, so you're an MP. That doesn't mean you're an expert in everything, and particularly most of them don't know a lot about science. So you are reliant on the look, it's like a computer. You put rubbish in, you'll get rubbish out. So if that information is controlled and you believe it, and you make a rubbish decision, right? That's what's happened here. And I just think that's why we're called G Honesty Foundation. This is about honesty of the science. It's not about Bosher's opinion here.
It's just facts of the matter.
It's the facts. And we're trying to get those out. That's what we're trying to do.
Trying. Okay, Paul, do you think there's anything else that we might want to cover? Anything you want to get off your chest?
I've got a lot of hope, I guess, that, you know, I've got faith in farmers. You know, I've got faith. You know, my dad was a farmer. He was old school, you know, and he prided himself in looking after his farm and producing good quality stock, right? Good quality food, right? Bless him, he's no longer here, but he would be appalled, absolutely appalled. And I think that if the New Zealand farmers really knew the facts here, the scientific facts of contamination, that it can't be stopped, it can't be managed if these GE crops get out, that I think there'll be a big pushback. And why would you vote for a government that allowed this to happen? You wouldn't. It doesn't make any sense, because you've just got a government that's pushing a bill through that's going to destroy your business. And you go, well, it's going to destroy your business into the future. So it'll be exponential. It'll start and it'll just go like that. So why would you? No one would vote for a government that allowed that to happen.
What could possibly go wrong, Paul? Okay, well, maybe we'll sign off there until next time. For anyone listening, your voice still matters. Please do go to our GE Honesty website. There is a treasure trove of information on there where you can get informed and educated on this subject. You can share it with your friends and help raise up others up with you, and still contact your MPs. Still keep getting in their ear.
And join our protests. Yeah. Join our protests. We're going to be, Callum, I think we're going to do a wider one again outside Fonterra's.
Totally. We're
office.
not done there.
No, we're not done there. We've just had a little start the other day, but we had a lot of people turn up, didn't we?
Yeah, we did actually. And follow our socials as well, so you can stay up to date on what we're posting, information that's out there on the latest. So, yeah.
Save our farms. Save our farms.
All right. Thanks, Paul.